is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Europe, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Juliet Mann. Our top stories. China and the United States prepare for their first high-level meeting of the Biden presidency.
Our other headlines: Europe decides on whether there is a link between the AstraZeneca vaccine and blood clots. Also coming up on the show.
There will be no cancelled appointments as a result of supply issues.
Britain's health minister says the UK's vaccination rollout remains on track despite a supply delay.
And Mark Rutte romps home in the Netherlands as he wins a fourth term in office.
All eyes are on Alaska as top officials from China and the US meet face-to-face. These are the first high-level talks since President Joe Biden took office in January. The ties between the world's two largest economies have been frosty in recent years, but the meeting in the coldest state in America could lead to a thaw. This is what China's ambassador to the US had to say about the talks.
Issues like Xinjiang, Hong Kong and Taiwan concern China's sovereignty, territorial integrity and national unity. With regard to these core interests, China has no room for compromise. This is the attitude we will make clear in the meeting. If someone thinks that China sincerely came to snowy Alaska just to make compromise and concession, then I would suggest that my colleagues in Beijing cancel this trip as soon as possible. Why bother to come here? I hope the people with such ideas give up this illusion.
Well, let's talk to Duncan Wrigley, the chief strategist of Everbright, Sun Hung Kai. Duncan, thank you very much for your company. China-US relations hit a low under the Trump administration. Is it simply naive to expect a complete reset under the Biden administration?
I think it is naive to expect a complete reset. There will certainly be a change in tone. There already has been a change in tone with the Biden administration. But, I mean, the reality is that two sides, the two countries are rivals in certain areas, and that sense of rivalry has emerged in the US over the last 5-10 years. Now, you know, that said, I do think there is possibility for some change. It probably won't happen in Alaska. I mean, that will just be starting the process, getting the two sides in contact. But I think where there is some hope is that the approach under the Biden administration is much more likely to be issues are siloed into different areas. And there are some areas where there's very likely to be very little progress. Some of those very sensitive issues mentioned at the top of the show, Hong Kong, Xinjiang and so forth. On other issues, there is much greater scope for the two countries to work together. So climate change, for example. And then there's a bag of kind of economic issues in the middle, which are a mixture of both. There's a lot of interest for American companies to invest in China, whether it's Tesla. On the other hand, there are some sticky areas such as technology development where there is quite strong competition.
What does China really want to change about its diplomatic and economic relationship with the United States?
Well, I think that China would hope for the mindset of the United States to change, to become much more of a kind of win-win situation where both countries are seeing opportunities to work together in different areas like climate change, and with less emphasis on the issues where the two sides are very far apart and there's very unlikely to be any progress.
Journalists often see gatherings like this as an event, but perhaps it would be wiser to see them as a longer process. I mean, this is a diplomatic shopping list from hell, this agenda, isn't it? As you say, trade wars, human rights, Hong Kong, Xinjiang. I mean, there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of room for negotiation in one hit.
Yeah, I don't think either side are seriously expecting much negotiation. both sides are saying. We're hoping, the Chinese side's hoping for a reset in effect. I think on the US side, frankly speaking, domestic issues are top of the agenda. COVID, the economy, and foreign affairs, including China, are some way behind in terms of the urgency. And so I think the best that could be hoped is that the people involved, these key people and the senior officials on both sides get along well, and they start in play the kind of diplomatic processes, albeit boring, complicated, and so forth, that could lead over time to a thawing of relations and improvement in some of these areas.
Duncan Wrigley, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Let's go to our correspondent, Mark New, in Anchorage for the latest. Hello there, Mark. What can we expect from this meeting?
Juliet, the meeting is going to happen right now. It's about 7 a.m. here in chilly Anchorage, Alaska, and right behind me is the Captain Cook Hotel where the 4 diplomats are going to meet. It's just after 8 a.m. right now. The meeting is expected to take place at about 1 p.m. They'll go for several hours and then have a dinner break, and then they're going to reconvene and meet again. And it's also been added that they are going to have another meeting Friday morning, so plenty of talks going on. As we heard, the U.S. is expected to, China is expected to raise issues of economic stability, climate change, and, of course, the Chinese tech restrictions, the Chinese companies, all the tech restrictions that they're currently facing. And the U.S. is going to talk about cybersecurity, actions in Xinjiang, Hong Kong election, Taiwan, and security in the South China Sea. We heard from Ambassador Cui Tiankai earlier. He also said some other words about all the partnerships that have been going on with the U.S. For example, they met in Tokyo, South Korea, and Blinken made a statement there in South Korea that about China's aggressive natures and actions that have been going on, that they were counterproductive to security in the region. Cui Tiankai had talked earlier about there's nothing wrong with talking with your partners, but when you start targeting one country, that's what they have a problem with. Also, he compared it to walking on the streets and singing to raise your courage when you're alone. It may feel good for yourself, but it doesn't do a lot of good in the end. Juliet.
Well, Mark, a few of the topics that you flagged there, those are ones that have made headlines, not always for the right reason. I mean, it's a time of heightened tensions between the two countries. You've given us a taste there, but how would you sum up the mood ahead of these talks?
Well, I think the mood, I'll talk about the mood here in Alaska and then the mood from the sides headed into the meeting. And the expectations have been quite low from both sides. They're sort of, not overselling it right now. This is just an initial step. Obviously, we've got different views and different issues that they want to bring up. Whether those two actually intersect and make productivity is going to be difficult when there's such different issues that they're focused on. Both sides have said this is just an initial discussion for us to really voice our opinion and also to hear their opinion to see where everybody stands on the issues. The U.S. side, it's kind of rare that they have a Secretary of State and National Security Advisor at the same time. They said it's quite rare because they want to actually show unity in this and have the same public and private message. And they've said in the past, according to them, and accused China of trying to divide those two and play them against each other. They want to show a unified front. Here in Alaska, I've talked to the community, and everybody I've talked to in the business community has high hopes because China is Alaska's top trading partner, but it's fluctuated back and forth with Japan. And the big reason was the trade war. Seafood, minerals, everything all down because of that. So they really want economic ties to be regained and the tourism to come back. They depend a lot on Chinese tourists, so they really want this to be the spirit of starting things that will head to that rebuilding of ties again. Juliet.
So a spirit of, collaboration, it sounds like. Great talking to you, Mark, and we'll have more from Mark New in Anchorage later on in the programme.
China's top chip maker is building a $2 billion factory in Shenzhen. It's part of China's bid to become self-sufficient in chips amid tensions with the United States. A recent semiconductor shortage has forced some companies and various industries to scale back production. The founder of the Chinese e-commerce giant Pinduoduo has stepped down as chairman. Colin Huang remains the company's largest shareholder. The company's shares dropped more than 7% in the US after he announced his departure. Irish imports from the UK fell 65% to $594 million in January compared to the same month last year. Irish exports to the UK, which does not include the British region of Northern Ireland, fell 14% to $1.1 billion. Both countries are close trading partners, but the UK left EU trading rules at the end of December, while Ireland remains an EU member. Around 3,500 gorillas have been adopted by members of the online Reddit page Wall Street Bets. The group rose to prominence after its users invested heavily in the gaming retailer GameStop and boosted its share price. The charity for the protection of endangered gorillas says the symbolic adoptions are worth $350,000 in donations. The German DAX has hit a record high thanks to optimistic earnings outlooks from car makers. European stocks overall also hovered around pre-pandemic levels. This all follows a decision by the US Federal Reserve to keep interest rates low despite a predicted rise in economic growth.
We'll bring some breaking news to you now. The European Medicines Agency says the benefits of the AstraZeneca vaccine outweigh the risks, but it says it can't definitely rule out a link to rare blood clots. Some clotting events have resulted in some countries suspending use of the AstraZeneca shot. Let's talk to our correspondent, Tony Waterman, who's in Brussels. Tony, what has the EMA director had to say on the AstraZeneca vaccine today?
Well, Emma Cook was unequivocal when she was delivering this information just now, calling it a clear scientific conclusion that the AstraZeneca vaccine is safe to use, saying that the vaccine is not associated with the overall risk of blood clots. But during their investigation, she said, they came across these very rare but very serious blood clotting disorders that were cropping up. And she said that at this point in time, they are unable to conclude whether or not there is a link there. They're just not sure at this point. So what they're doing is they are launching further investigations into this. They're going to continue monitoring, but their advice and their recommendation at the moment, which we've heard so far, is to raise awareness on this blood clotting disorder, to make sure that health officials and people who are vaccinating individuals are aware of it, and also raising awareness in the public so that they can be on the lookout for any sort of sign that may come across that they're experiencing this type of disorder. So raising awareness at this point. But she also said that these member states which have hit the pause button on the AstraZeneca vaccine, she's urging them to lift that, to start using the vaccine again, because as she pointed out, thousands of people across Europe are dying every single day. They have not found a link between these blood clots and the vaccine, so very much urging member states to begin reusing it again.
But Tony, we've been hearing about bottlenecks. Now we've got this knock to confidence. I mean, will this ruling have an impact, or much of an impact, on the EU's vaccine rollout?
Well, at this point, now that it's been given the all clear, it's going to be up to the individual member states and their national health regulators on whether or not they want to start using it again. France and Italy had indicated earlier in the week that they would lift their suspensions if it got the green light from EMA. So we'll have to wait and see how they proceed forward. But, you know, these health regulators and these governments are really in a tough spot at this point, because on one hand, they want the public to know that they are being very vigilant with these potential side effects from these vaccines, which are produced out of a new technology. Some of them, all of these vaccines developed at a record pace, and this has caused some hesitancy in people. That's this type of vaccine, which sometimes can take a decade to develop, has now been developed in some cases in under a year. But on the other side, by pushing the pause button, saying they want to investigate, that has seemed to have shaken some public confidence. We know that thousands of appointments, vaccination appointments across Europe this week, that people were no-shows in certain countries. In France, for example, the French broadcaster did a poll and found just 20% of the public had trust in the AstraZeneca vaccine. So this could leave some lasting damage. Now, this may not be such a big problem for Europe, because there are 3 other vaccines which have already been approved for use and are in circulation. Johnson & Johnson will come online very shortly in April. But when you look across at low-income, middle-income countries, they are very much dependent on the COVAX facility, and the main player in that facility is the AstraZeneca jab. So if there's an undermining of confidence among those countries, then that will be a big problem right now. And the head of the European WHO, the World Health Organization, urging people to continue using this jab. The WHO, by the way, going to release the result of its own investigation into AstraZeneca tomorrow.
Tony Waterman in Brussels, thank you for that update.
Well, Spain has launched an investigation into the death of a teacher after she had the AstraZeneca jab. The uncertainty over the vaccine, plus the rules regarding Spain's entire inoculation programme, has led to some accusations that some groups in society are being ignored. Rahul Pathak reports now from Madrid.
Meet 72-year-old Marie Carmen. She is currently in vaccine limbo. In Spain, the Pfizer and Moderna jabs have been used for those over 80 and AstraZeneca initially for people under 55, leaving Marie Carmen in the middle.
Of course I am worried because this directly affects me. I hope that we all get vaccinated as soon as possible. I would like most of the population to be vaccinated by the summer. It will mean everyone would feel more relaxed and can move around easier. That is really important for everyone.
Doctors in Spain had been calling for the AstraZeneca vaccine to be offered to older people before Spain suspended its use on Monday. Nearly 1 million Spaniards have had at least one AZ jab, mainly emergency service workers and teachers. The news that Spain is now investigating the death of a teacher, plus 2 other cases of thrombosis from people who had had the AstraZeneca jab, will be of huge concern.
It may or may not be caused by the vaccine. It may or may not be related. So far, we know that in these 3 cases there is a temporal link, but a causal link has not been established.
Now, of the 3 vaccines that Spain has been using, the AstraZeneca has only been administered to people 55 and under. So its suspension is unlikely to have a huge impact on Spain's overall vaccination programme. The government insisting that it will reach its target of having 70% of the population vaccinated by the summer.
I think suspension was the right move. The state needs to guarantee their citizens' safety, and if a vaccine doesn't reach our health standards, then it's right to remove it.
I have always had my doubts about getting vaccinated because it is so new and there's a lot of misleading opinions, and that has generated uncertainty.
That growing uncertainty among the population could lead to greater vaccine hesitancy, and that would deal a massive blow to Spain's whole inoculation campaign. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Vaccination voyages. Could huge container ships be the answer to delivering jabs around the world?
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Covering the world from 4 continents. A new horizon. Teams in Beijing, Washington, D.C., Nairobi, and London. Who connect, interact, and inquire. To bring you the stories that matter to all. The Link, only on CGTN.
Don't forget you can sign up to our daily newsletter. We bring you all the top business headlines straight to your inbox. So sign up for free at this address. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. And remember, CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV. We're on YouTube and Daily Motion as well, and of course CGTN.com and the CGTN app.
The UK government insists it is on track to offer all adults a first dose of a coronavirus vaccine by the end of July. This comes as it admits it's expecting a reduction in supplies for April that'll delay the rollout. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Naweed Jabarkal in London. Naweed, just how serious are these expected supply problems?
Well, Jamie, concerns are growing about the upcoming shortage. The National Health Service has written to vaccination centres across the country, pharmacies and doctor surgeries like this, places where the vaccines are taking place, and has warned them of a, quote, significant reduction expected in supplies throughout the month of April. Speaking in Parliament earlier, the Health Minister, Matt Hancock, confirmed that there would be a shortfall, but he said that that wasn't anything unusual. Have a listen.
In the last week, we've had a batch of 1.7 million doses delayed because of the need to retest its stability. Events like this are to be expected in a manufacturing endeavour of this complexity, and this shows the rigour of our safety checks. And we have a delay in a scheduled arrival from the Serum Institute of India.
Now, this will delay the setback, the UK's rapid rollouts, but it has been a pretty quick one of the quickest anywhere in the world. And while those sorts of supplies from India, for example, are affected, we've had that confirmed, there are other supplies that are on their way to the UK, including the US firm Moderna. It said earlier today that it's going to start sending vaccines to the UK from April. That's why the official government here is so confident that it will meet its bigger target to give every adult in the country a jab by the end of July, and even sooner than that to give all of those aged over 50. So it is still on course, but this, of course, does highlight the precarious nature of the entire vaccination programme, not just here, but in Europe and worldwide. And in the last few moments, we've had that decision that we heard about earlier from the European Medicines Agency, and that's really vindicating what the UK government has been saying and what the regulator here has been saying as well. It's the same sort of message, that the benefits at the moment outweigh the risks. That's what the MHRA has been saying here, the regulator in the UK. That's what the government has been saying, and that's what the company based in the UK has been saying. Officials and medical professionals here have been moving quickly in recent days to try and reassure the public that it is safe to use, so much so that the Prime Minister himself, Boris Johnson, has said he's going to get an AstraZeneca jab. Jamie.
Naweed Jabarkal in London. Thank you very much.
Well, it is hoped that any squeeze on vaccine supplies is short-term, as an increase in production and new vaccines coming to market should change all that. The challenge is then transporting the vaccine around the world, a huge logistical task. The quickest way is by air, but shipping in bulk via sea is cheaper. Well, Hristo Petrov, the head of pharmaceuticals at Maersk, told me how the world's largest shipping company is helping the rollout.
It's something that we predict is going to happen over the next 3 to 4 years, given the fact that the vaccines get approved on time, production stays steady, and supply chain is ready to meet the challenge. So we see the challenge would be able to be completed in the next 3 to 4 years.
But ships are slow and vaccines need to be temperature controlled. Surely air transport makes more sense?
One thing to consider is that ocean freight moves most of the products globally. The same is applied to pharma and healthcare. Looking specifically in pharma and healthcare, it's important to consider that a lot of the products that already move with ocean freight are temperature controlled. Ocean freight has the capabilities of moving 2 to 8 degrees temperature controlled cargo. It has the reliability, gives control and visibility to transport pharmaceutical products. So it's not really strange that we are talking would the COVID-19 vaccine move in ocean containers, but when would the COVID-19 vaccine move in ocean containers?
So not if, but when. Let's talk, though, about protecting precious cargo and, of course, your people. I mean, what about pirates? What about extreme weather?
These are some of the extremes that do happen in ocean transport, but you also have to remember that there is a lot of challenges in air transport. Ocean transport overall is very reliable. It moves up to 80% of the pharmaceutical products globally. So, and we have a dedicated team that puts an extra care in making sure that the COVID-19 vaccine and other vaccines that are moving already today by ocean transport are taken care of.
Another challenge to the industry is containers, a shortage of the containers, those backbone of international trade and transportation. So what impact is that shortage having on Maersk?
That's something that we focused on last year. We are on a journey to digitize trade, to integrate container logistics, to focus on sustainability. So it's very important that we have really escalated our service offering, and we are able to deliver to the customers. What we have also done is we have looked at some alternatives to meet these shortages in ocean. We have deployed train solutions, for example, from China to Europe. We are looking into air freight solutions as well. So giving a well-rounded supply chain solution to the customers has been our driving goal to be able to deliver to them.
The Hungarian Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, says the third wave of the pandemic will reach its peak in his country by the end of March, but added it's too early to ease lockdown. This despite Hungary having one of Europe's highest vaccination rates, which is attributed to its pursuing a rather different strategy to its neighbours. Penelope Lurch reports now from Budapest.
A year on, Hungary remains in the grip of the pandemic, with 207 deaths recorded in the last 24 hours. That's the highest daily death toll so far. But there is now a counterattack to this devastating third wave: vaccination. Another 100,000 doses flew in on Wednesday. The latest shipment is Sinopharm, one of 5 jabs on offer after the country turned to Russia and China for extra supplies. Officials here are critical of the EU's slow and interrupted vaccine rollout.
The speed of the vaccination is not up to the number of vaccination points, but the amount of vaccines available, because Brussels is not sending us what they are supposed to. Therefore, if there will be enough vaccines, we can increase the number of hospital vaccination points to 1,547 and the number of clinic vaccination points to 200, making a total of 6,752 sites.
While other countries are arguing over vaccine exports and worried about the safety of others, the Hungarian government says it has the right strategy and the program is ahead of schedule. The Prime Minister says Hungary would be in big trouble right now if they'd followed the EU strategy and not ordered more jabs from Russia and China. He's even talking about producing a vaccine locally to prepare for future epidemics. According to the government, new data shows people's willingness to be vaccinated is also increasing, with 46.4% already vaccinated or in favour of getting a jab. That's up from 15% at the end of last year.
We are waiting for vaccines. We are waiting for them every day, but the amount to be delivered is limited. We have vaccinated more than 1,300,000 people in Hungary. That's a very nice number. We inoculate with every single vial that comes to Hungary.
The country is in second place in the European Union in terms of vaccination headcount and believes it could mean a more rapid exit from the latest wave than some other EU countries. Penelope Lurch, CGTN, Budapest.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Italy's first National Day of Remembrance for victims of coronavirus.
Patient after patient after patient. They take a long time to get better. They're the sickest patients we've ever seen.
It's a race against time, because we can all see the threat that our NHS faces, the pressure it's under.
We're dealing with something we knew very little about.
Europe's first two epicenters in February have received their first dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine.
Another day, another grim milestone for the UK in its fight against COVID-19. 100,000 people have now lost their lives after contracting the virus.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
We can try out the wild and crazy idea. Nothing can stop an idea whose time has come, and this idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN. Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Juliet Mann. Our top stories. China and the United States prepare for their first high-level meeting of the Biden presidency.
The European Medicines Agency recommends countries resume using the AstraZeneca vaccine.
This is a safe and effective vaccine. Its benefits in protecting people from COVID-19 with the associated risks of death and hospitalisation outweigh the possible risks.
And Britain's health minister says the UK's vaccination rollout remains on track despite a supply delay.
The Prime Minister of Netherlands, Mark Rutte, has claimed an overwhelming exit polls showed his party has won the most seats in parliamentary elections and will form a new coalition government. His last government resigned in January over a child welfare fraud scandal. CGTN's Stefan de Vries reports from The Hague.
The Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte is used to this ritual. It's his fourth consecutive victory speech. In January, Mark Rutte handed in his resignation after admitting he was responsible for a scandal in which thousands of families were wrongly accused of child benefit fraud. Despite the public outcry at the time, it has not dented his popularity.
I just note that the result of this election is that the voters in the Netherlands have given my party, the Dutch Liberal Party, an overwhelming vote of confidence. And it is humbling. It is also forcing us to do everything we can to make a success out of it. Not everything has gone well in the last 10 years.
Despite a rocky ride, Rutte is clearly well liked. Polls show a large majority support how he has dealt with the coronavirus. So Mark Rutte's victory was not a surprise. Unexpected, though, was the big win of his social liberal coalition partner D66, led by the incumbent Minister of Foreign Trade, Sigrid Kaag.
I have always believed, and this evening it's been confirmed, that the Dutch are not extremists, but are moderate.
Extreme right leader Geert Wilders' popularity took a hit, but he will continue as an opposition politician. But that doesn't mean xenophobic views are losing momentum. Two other populist and anti-immigration parties won another 12 seats. During the counting of the votes on Wednesday night, the hopes of the left's parties were shattered. The Labour Party, the Socialists and the Greens did not manage to convince the Dutch they had the ideas to see the country through coronavirus recovery. There was also a surprise win for the newcomer Volt. The outspoken pro-European party won 3 seats out of nothing, making it the first time in Europe that this party succeeds in entering a national parliament. Rutte now hopes to secure a quick deal for a coalition. Last time it took almost 7 months, and that difficult task has already started. The pro-European party D66 will be part of it, but Rutte has made promises to the conservative CDA, so it'll be a tough negotiation to try and please them all. But he's quite well practiced by now. Mark Rutte may be the big winner today, yet as soon as the COVID crisis is behind him, the Dutch Prime Minister knows he's facing a giant task.
The main issue also on the table for the next years is how to rebuild the country going forward after Corona.
For the Dutch, he is seen as a steady hand, but he now has to guide the country in a turbulent world with a pandemic which has yet to run its full course. Stefan de Vries, CGTN, The Hague.
Italy has marked its first National Day of Remembrance for victims of the pandemic. The country's Prime Minister paid tribute at a service in Bergamo, one of the city's hardest hit. Hermione Kitson reports.
A symbol of regeneration and hope. The first tree planted in the Forest of Remembrance next to the Bergamo hospital where so many lost their battle against COVID-19.
Today is a day full of sadness but also of hope.
We decided to honor the memory of the victims with a living artwork, with a monument that breathes.
In a national day of mourning, Prime Minister Mario Draghi led sombre services reflecting on the pain of the pandemic, which has now claimed more than 100,000 lives.
We can't embrace, but today we must feel as united as possible. The government is here and always will be.
On March 18, 2020, Bergamo became the country's symbol of suffering, with convoys of army trucks needed to cope with the sheer number of casualties.
There are many images of this tragedy, but one is indelible, the line of military trucks loaded with coffins.
1 year on, and the region of Lombardy is once again the epicentre of the country's latest wave of infection. On Wednesday, there were 23,000 new cases of the virus and 431 deaths. Hospitals in red zones are overflowing with patients.
We dreamed that this day would mark the end of a long and painful page of the pandemic, but infections are on the rise and new restrictions are in place.
The Prime Minister paid tribute to frontline workers and pledged to accelerate the country's vaccination plan.
I am here today to say thank you, and I will dedicate myself, together with you all, to reconstruct the country without forgetting.
In the memory of loved ones who are no longer here, we must be strong and work together to build a better future.
Crucial words of faith amid yet another state of emergency. Hermione Kitson, CGTN, Bergamo.
The African Union says its member states should continue to use the AstraZeneca vaccine. It comes after several European countries suspended its use amid concerns over blood clots. The World Health Organization has said the jab's benefits far outweigh the risks. AstraZeneca says it reviewed the data of 17 million people and results showed no evidence of increased risk. Germany has reported its biggest daily rise in COVID-19 cases in 2 months. The number of confirmed infections increased by over 17,000. More than 74,000 people have died from coronavirus in the country. China has reported the first local coronavirus case in more than a month. The patient works at a hospital in the city of Xi'an and is responsible for collecting samples for coronavirus testing. It's believed the infection was caused by accidental exposure to the virus in an isolation ward. A Turkish prosecutor has applied to ban the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party, alleging it has ties to Kurdish fighters. It's the culmination of several years of pressure on Turkey's third biggest parliamentary party, the HDP. The EU and the US have criticised the move, saying it undermines democracy. Ankara says it rejects international criticism. Tanzania's President John Magufuli has died at the age of 61. Aides said Magufuli, who had not been seen publicly for 18 days, died from heart disease. Earlier reports claimed he'd contracted coronavirus. Well, Magufuli had played down the threat from COVID-19, saying prayers and suggesting home remedies would protect people. Tokyo's state of emergency to curb the spread of the coronavirus will be lifted on Sunday. The Japanese capital and 3 neighbouring prefectures have been under the restrictions since January. Daily new cases and hospital bed occupancy rates have come down. But the government is warning cautionary measures must remain in place to prevent a resurgence. Staying in Japan, the creative chief for Tokyo's Olympics Committee has resigned after suggesting that a plus-size female entertainer could wear pig ears at the opening ceremony. Hiroshi Sasaki apologised and said he recognised his comments were insulting. It comes after the former president of the Games quit over sexist remarks after saying that women talk too much in meetings.
The US economy is expected to roar back into life this year. The Federal Reserve is forecasting 6.5% growth as the vaccine rollout and stimulus measures kick in. The central bank also signalled it plans to keep interest rates close to zero until at least 2024. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrett, watching events for us in New York. John, the markets have rallied on these Fed comments, haven't they?
Yes. You know, Jamie and Juliet, they really have. We are in the middle of a very strong rally that began on Wednesday, and at least for one market is continuing today on this rainy Thursday here on Wall Street. More about that in just a second. But just for our viewers around the world, what normally happens is the Federal Reserve, the central bank, the committee that decides interest rates, they meet pretty much every month. Not every month, but more or less every month. And they met on Wednesday, and Tuesday, two-day meeting. They make a decision on interest rates. Then there's a press conference involving the chairman of the central bank, Jerome Powell. And then a couple of weeks later, we get the minutes so we can all pick through and say, oh, he said that, she said that, that sort of thing. So where we're at the moment is we've had the press conference and the markets just took off on Wednesday after Jerome Powell spoke to the media. Normally the markets go down when he speaks because what he talks about is so complex that even financial journalists have trouble following it. And I'm not joking when I say that. So we had a big rally on Wednesday and one of the markets is up again today, Thursday. So what did he say? Well, you touched on one of the things. Basically, he said no change in policy. So no interest rate hikes until 2023. Easy money till then. GDP for 2021, 6.5%. Pretty good. I think this is staggering. The unemployment rate, 4.5% is the forecast. When you think a year ago we were at 20% and heading to 40%, it's a remarkable turnaround. I know there are parts of the U.S. economy that are hurting very badly. And the Fed is happy with inflation at around 2%. I think it spikes to 2.4 at one point, but it comes back down again. So Wall Street is grooving at the moment on all the stimulus that's about to hit the U.S. economy between now and the end of the year. The $1,400 stimulus checks are now going directly into people's bank accounts. And Deutsche Bank, out of Germany, saying only last week that 50% of the money will go into stocks and shares in the age group between 25 and 34. And that's why the Dow closed on Wednesday for the first time above 33,000. Jamie?
John, at the risk of curbing your excitement, why are most markets down then?
Well, I know. It's funny, isn't it, the way these things go? The reason is that there's been a spike in long-term interest rates. The 10-year T-bond tied to mortgages spiked up to 1.25%, the first time since January 2020. And when that happens, traders look and they say, well, that means more costs going up for us. We may have to sell some stocks now, and they tend to sell the technology stocks. This is the umpteenth time, though, that this has happened. And as I've said, the Federal Reserve is confident about inflation. Jerome Powell's message was basically don't worry about it. It's only around 2%, which has been forecast for a long time, compared to, I mean, in the UK, in 1975, it was 25% inflation. And in the US, it was 20%. So there really is no true inflation issue. But whenever it spikes, that 10-year bond, the markets do fret. And so at the moment, we have the Dow on a tear, okay, so it's looking at stimulus, and it's up 188 points, well above 33,000. The NASDAQ, with those technology stocks, they've been hit badly by that spike. They're under pressure because of the yield increase, and so too is the S&P 500, the broad market. Jamie and Juliet.
John, keep dancing. Good to see you. John Terrett there for us in New York. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the stars making SPACs sexy. We'll find out why there's been a sudden boom in blank check companies.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore, We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Well, let's return to a developing story now on the AstraZeneca vaccine. The European Medicines Agency says the benefits of the jab outweigh the risks, but it says it cannot definitely rule out a link to rare blood clots. Let's talk to our correspondent, Tony Waterman, who's in Brussels. So, Tony, the green light for AstraZeneca, but concerns remain.
Yeah, the head of the European drugs regulator being very unequivocal today, saying that this is a safe and effective vaccine for people to use, saying that the benefits once again outweigh the risks, and also that they did not find any definitive link between blood clotting and the vaccine. But as you mentioned, a little bit of a but there, because they said during their investigation they came across a small number of very unusual, very rare, but very serious cases of blood clotting disorders, and they said that they cannot rule out that this is linked to the vaccine itself. These are cases of blood clots associated with those low levels of blood platelets that we've been hearing about, also blood draining from the brain. And their recommendation right now is that this is a safe vaccine to use, but that there should be warning labels put on its use, that there should try to raise awareness in the public and health professionals so that they can spot the signs and symptoms if somebody who's received the vaccine is experiencing this type of blood clot. But take a listen to what the head of the European Medicines Agency, Emma Cook, had to say just a moment ago.
This is a safe and effective vaccine. Its benefits in protecting people from COVID-19 with the associated risks of death and hospitalization outweigh the possible risks.
As you know, 19 European countries have now pushed the pause button on the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Emma Cook wouldn't say whether they should unpause that decision, but said that now they have the scientific data to make an informed decision. And already France, Italy, and Ireland earlier this week, they had indicated that they would reuse the vaccine if it got the all clear.
Tony Waterman, thank you for the update.
Well, let's return now to our other big story, those high-level talks between China and the United States. They come as tensions continue to rise over a number of issues, including technology. Alaska, where the talks are being held, may not appear to be a major player in the tech scene, but in some ways it epitomizes tech's global potential. Here's Mark New again.
Well, I'm Joel Forbes. I'm from Togiak, Alaska. That is here. The original name of that is Duyulyak. I'm a Yupik Eskimo.
For years, Joel Forbes was part of a singing and dancing group. Today, Joel's a tech worker at the startup 60 Hertz, which provides maintenance software to help people in remote places like where he's from troubleshoot and repair energy systems.
Bringing new technology to the old world, it empowers people to better utilize their skills. They're keeping the lights on in their communities, and this software helps them get that data and make sure everything is running correctly.
60 Hertz went through the program Launch Alaska, which may be the world's only startup accelerator that's actually called a deployment accelerator. The idea is to partner startups with local companies to challenge their technology by taking on everything from rough terrain to harsh weather conditions to the high energy costs of Alaska.
We have a lot of really tough conditions of everything from, hot to cold. We have, more coastline than the rest of the U.S. combined. If you're trying to sell into the electric grid space, we have over 200 independent islanded microgrids. We have one of the world's premier flying communities, so if there's anything that you're trying to do in the air, whether that's UAVs or manned systems or aviation tech, Alaska is kind of the premier, testing ground.
Now Alaska appears to be the testing ground for high-level talks between Chinese and U.S. officials. Vandenberg hopes thorny issues over tech will be discussed. Tech tensions between the two countries heightened after the Biden administration designated 5 Chinese tech companies, including Huawei and ZTE, national security risks. Chinese officials say this move was counterproductive and will harm U.S. companies too.
The technology topics are the front line of the China-U.S. tensions. And of course, several years ago, the U.S.-China tensions started with a trade war. But as the trade war evolved, we find that the technology-related topics increasingly become the front line. And so to me, Alaska is such a connecting point.
A literal and figurative connecting point over how the two most powerful tech nations in the world can both lead and compete in a digital economy. Mark New, CGTN, Anchorage, Alaska.
Some of the biggest names in sport, business and entertainment are fueling a boom in special purpose acquisition companies, better known as SPACs. Celebrities such as Serena Williams and Shaquille O'Neal have got involved. Now, SPACs are shell or blank check companies set up by investors to raise money through an IPO. And the sole purpose is to acquire a privately held company and turn it private. Public even. It's a fast route to public markets, which has been around for decades, but it has been previously associated with fraud and lackluster returns. That's because it's not always without its risks. Investors have had no idea what they're investing in, and target companies could have their acquisition rejected by SPAC shareholders. Well, the sudden appetite for SPACs follows extreme market volatility caused in part by the pandemic. I mean, last year, more than $83 billion was raised around the world through almost 250 IPOs. Now, that figure has already been eclipsed. So far, 269 new SPACs have been launched just in the first quarter so far of 2021, overtaking last year's record, and more than $87 billion has been raised so far. Well, I spoke to Drew Bernstein, the co-chairman of accountancy firm Markham, Bernstein and Pinchuk, and asked him why SPACs have suddenly come back into fashion.
The SPACs are very similar to what we used to call RTOs, or reverse mergers. And one of the things that was so attractive about the reverse merger was it did 2 things, principally. Number one, for companies that needed capital, you could raise capital quickly in 3 to 4 months rather than, say, 6 to 9 months to do an IPO. And more importantly, at the end of this process, the company is guaranteed to be public rather than taking the risk in the market. In an IPO, there's no guarantee that you will be public if people don't buy the stock. And for those companies considering an RTO or IPO, one of the really nice things about the SPAC is it's a negotiated price. You don't have to go to the market and take the risk. So there's a lot of attractive things about a SPAC.
You say it's like the new bank in town, but in the 80s, SPACs had a bit of a shady reputation. So talk us through the risks.
Yes, that is one of, if you want to call it, some of the baggage of the SPACs right now, that historically their returns have not been as good as, say, IPOs. But, 4 or 5 years ago, the SPACs, as I said, were only raising $5, $6, $7 billion a year. Today, with the amount of money that they're raising, they're chasing different deals today. We're in the world of unicorn companies today. And in 2013, when the term was only first used, and a unicorn is something to be rare or mythical, there was only 39 of them. Today, there's over 600 of them. And of the 600, 80% of them are in China and the United States. And this is what people are chasing today.
The majority of SPACs are listed in the United States. I mean, I think there's only one that's gone public on the London Stock Exchange. So I'm just wondering why that is and where you might see the growth potential. Is it Europe? Is it Asia? Where is this going to roll?
Well, the SPACs right now, you know, the question, are they coming to Asia? And I think that question's already been answered. They're not coming to Asia. The plane's already arrived. You've seen some of the largest investment banks, hedge funds. Goldman Sachs opened up a SPAC office in Hong Kong. So the SPAC market has come to China. My firm right now is probably working on over 20, 25 Asian SPACs right now. So that is a new, what I would consider a new competitive product. And there are some advantages to using it right now. SPACs have money, cash. They don't have to raise it. And that's attractive.
And from SPACs to space, Beijing has launched a new interactive technology exhibition about China's manned space program. Sen Yuan has the story.
Humans have always been fascinated about the unknown, and there is nothing we know less about than space. When it comes to exploring our solar system, let alone the universe, so dreams of flying into space have long figured in our imagination.
This is an interactive technological exhibition that showcases what it feels like to be in space and the experience of being an astronaut.
The exhibition is divided into 6 parts: Journey Through Time, Fighting for Dreams, Realizing the Space Dream, Aerospace Homeland, Aerospace Dining, and finally, Future Tunnel.
You can see a lot of the components on display. Such models and tools are being used in research and development by the scientists.
The designer says the challenge lies in how to showcase the spirit of Chinese astronauts through the display of physical objects. The project has taken him 2 years to complete.
No matter whether it's the Chinese space station we're building now or future journeys to the moon and to deep space, our exploration serves the needs of our country. Public education is a systematic project. It's a collective effort of the society.
The designer says these tomatoes are provided by China's aerospace authorities. They have exposed to the radiation from space. The exhibitors want to use the show to inspire more young Chinese to explore their interest and curiosity about the great unknown. Sen Ziyuan, CGTN, Beijing.
Let's stay in space. The creators of Barbie have released a new edition of the world's most famous doll in the likeness of Russia's only active female cosmonaut. Anna Kokina is one of only 4 Russian women to fly into space. She's due to go on her first mission to the International Space Station next year. Now, the new doll, which is not for sale, is part of a campaign by the Mattel company to encourage young girls to go into science and technology.
The headlines again. China and the United States prepare for their first high-level meeting of the Biden presidency.
And the European Medicines Agency recommends countries resume using the AstraZeneca vaccine.
And that's just about it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
There's more on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps such as Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, on YouTube and Dailymotion, as well as CGTN.com and the CGTN app.
Well, from all of the team here in London, goodbye.